Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick.
I'm Ian.
So we're doing another one of those album face-offs today. What have we done in the past? I know we did Use Your Illusion 1 versus Use Your Illusion 2. We did
Metallica.
And Justice for All versus the Black Album. Mm-hmm. I think there was a third one we've done. We've done a couple of them so far. But today we're doing two classic albums, both turned 50 years old this year. Doing Billion Dollar Babies by Alice Cooper versus
Sabbath Bloody Sabbath by Black Sabbath.
There's a bunch of links down below. Make sure you go check them out. There's links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist we put together every week, and the Patreon page. Make sure you go check all that out. Of course, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give us a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time we release new episodes. So if you haven't seen one of our face-off videos so far, what we do is we're going to talk about our pros and cons for each album, and then it's going to be hard with this one, really. Come down and decide which album is better. This one, like I said, I'm up in the air right now, so we'll see what I come up with at the end of the video. But the first album we'll go over is Billion Dollar Babies. And I know a lot of people, this probably isn't their favorite Alice Cooper album. I think general fans probably lean more towards School Is Out, just because how popular School Is Out is.
The song, yeah.
And that's that's I think why maybe the one con I have against Billion Dollar Babies is it doesn't have that huge, gigantic hit off of it.
You know what, though? I think I could be wrong on this, but I think this was more...
Nice Guy is,
well, I was going to say, I think Billion Dollar Babies was commercially a bigger success. It was their biggest success.
Yeah.
At the time, so it's hard to say that, but I think maybe in the retrospect side of it,
and that's what I'm talking about. Obviously, people that grew up in the '70s, definitely know this album. But I feel like 50 years later, a lot of people have kind of lost this album in Alice Cooper's discography.
Because this had more singles off it too.
I believe it did.
Because it had Billion Dollar Babies, and No More Mr. Nice Guy, Hello Hooray.
I think Elected was a single.
Elected was a single as well. Yeah, they even did a promotional video. That's what they used to call music videos back in the '70s for it, which is quite interesting to watch.
Well, '70s videos in general are pretty interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, it's really good. It's all just, like video footage of Alice Cooper running around like he's running for office, but he's drunk and smoking cigarettes and playing with the chimpanzee in the campaign offices. It's just, typical Alice Cooper.
Yeah. So as far as like cons go for the album, outside of that, I don't think this really has a really skippable track on there. There's a couple of tracks I think are okay, but they're not skippable. There's every track on here. This is definitely one of those albums I could put on and listen straight through. What?
Just want to look at the track listing again.
Here, I'll pull the album out of the back of it. You can actually see it. Oh, it doesn't. You can't. You've got to look at the...
That's fine.
The stupid me, I was thinking that the track listing was actually on the back of the album, which it is kind of, because you really got to look at it. So you get Elected, I Love the Dead, Sick Things, Billion Dollar Babies, Hello Hooray. They're all great tracks.
Yeah, Sick Things is probably the only one I would ever skip over, to be honest with you.
That's kind of the only song on the album that I'm like, it's still not a bad track, but it's one that I guess I can probably do without.
And Generation Landslide is probably it's in my top 10 of Alice Cooper songs overall.
Yeah.
Of the several hundred songs that you can attribute to Alice Cooper, it's like in the top 5.
Yeah. For me, this album is my favorite Alice Cooper band album. And it's probably my favorite Alice Cooper album overall. This and Welcome to My Nightmare are like right up there, 1 and 1B, I think.
And you could separate those as solo album versus band album.
And I do when I look at it. But there's nothing wrong with this album. It's an incredible album. My pros, it's all, the production is done great on this album. And in '73, there are albums out there that are celebrating 50th anniversary this year that I think are better albums because they've been remastered over the years. They've been remixed over the years. And this is one of those albums that,
it's just kind of fine. It's been remastered and remixed, but it's still...
The original mix and master of this album is still good. They did a really good job recording it. It sounds great. I can put that up there with some of the better albums, I think, production-wise, from the 70s.
And the packaging gimmicks were very intriguing and interesting. And
that's one thing I can say about 70s albums. There's a lot of 70s albums where they're trying to do more with the packaging, whether it's this or, Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull. There's just a long list of albums where they're trying to do something outside of the norm for the packaging to add that little special something to
And Alice Cooper always had some gimmick. Killer had the calendar for 1972.
Yeah, Schools
Out had the
desk.
panties. And the panties for to hold the record. This has the big fold out $1 billion bill. So Alice Cooper was always kind of on the forefront of some of that gimmicky packaging, and it works. All of that worked.
Yeah, because it's the fold-out wallet for
fold-out wallet. Yep.
So it's really cool, and that's, like I said, I think it adds, something extra to the album. So for Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, as far as my list of cons, I guess they're kind of like the same cons I've got for $1 Billion Babies. Sabbath Bloody Sabbath isn't Volume 4 or Paranoid, which were like the two big albums from Black Sabbath. But I think in a lot of ways, I think this is a better overall album than either one of those, even though I prefer Paranoid in Volume 4 over Sabbath Bloody Sabbath.
Well, like I said before we started recording, this is more of a go-to for me, actually, because there's only, in my opinion, only one skippable track on this album.
Yeah.
And it's Fluff, ironically titled. Every other song on there I enjoy listening to. I never skip over.
Yeah. Sabracadabra is one of my top Black Sabbath tracks. I mean, it's just
I think it's one of the most, well, maybe the second most covered Sabbath track, too.
Probably.
It's been covered didn't Misfits cover it?
No.
Oh, I know Metallica
did. And,
a couple other bands did, too.
It's, but this is an album that, like I said, there's just not, I really don't have any issues with it. Like you said, I can do without Fluff. It's kind of a Fluff track.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, it's a solid album.
It is,
from beginning to end. I think it's probably their most cohesive album.
Could be, and ironically, it was probably the most turbulent the period of the time in the band, other than when they broke up.
Yeah, I would say Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die.
You're right, they were
a little bit more turbulent.
That was a
time.
band. That was a band completely like breaking down. This was a band just trying to figure themselves out, trying to figure out what to do next.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, it works. It works on every level for me. And I don't know. Like I said, the only track I ever skip over is Fluff.
Yeah, and you're right. With this album, after the success that Black Sabbath had earlier in their career, music by the mid part of the 70s was really kind of changing. Mm-hmm. The rock landscape was changing, and Black Sabbath would go on to experiment a little bit more on some of their albums after this that I don't think worked nearly as well as it did on everything that they experimented with on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. I think really worked.
It worked because there was still a thematic connection to what they were doing before.
Yeah.
But they were exploring their musicality and everything else with it, which makes a big difference. And then once they go further, it's less of that connection to their core themes and trying to be even more different, which is fine. A lot of that works too, just not as well as it works
I think when they went on and did specifically Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die, music was very different.
Absolutely.
At that point, you had, it was mainly disco, punk were really huge in the later part of the 70s. And Black Sabbath didn't really know where to go or where they fit in the music landscape. And like I said, I think that's why those albums suffer, is because they lost the connection to the earlier
commercial
Sabbath
rock was, Journey and Boston and
Kiss.
Or they could kind of go way more back to their roots, but it wasn't even like their music anymore. And with the slightly heavier metal of like Judas Priest or Iron Maiden, which Iron Maiden wasn't quite out yet, but still. Yeah. Judas Priest specifically, there was a different type of metal.
Yeah, and Black Sabbath was really like they weren't the first metal band, but they were the first hugely successful metal band. They really kind of pioneered that genre, and by the time they recorded Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die, that genre had kind of moved past them. So
very much so. Yeah,
they were kind of lost in this no man's land. And like I said, I think some of the choices they made on those two albums, while I still enjoy both of those albums, I think they're both good albums. There's some songs on there that I kind of see why they get some of the hate they do, because it just doesn't sound right. It's not a what you would expect from Black Sabbath on those
because it's definitely not what they came before, and it's definitely not what came after. Because then they really embraced that newer version of metal.
Yeah.
Even Ozzy, even Ozzy solo was doing. He was embracing the metal side. They were embracing the metal side, but that newer version of it, that more. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's more commercially viable, but it was because it just happened to be at the time.
Yeah.
So it's really, this is arguably their last great album, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd say that.
As much as I love the albums that came after, this is like their last great album. Yeah. The last thing I would say about Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, when talking about packaging, there's no gimmicks here, but I've always loved the album cover. It's spooky and it's Sabbathy, but then you turn it over, it's got the juxtaposition of the same, essentially the same scenario, but from the heavenly side of it. The front cover is the hell version, and then the back version is the heaven version.
And that's kind of cool because the two albums that we're kind of comparing here, they had this like gimmicky thing with $1 Billion Babies that really works, and they still kind of had it's just with the artwork on this album, but it's really kind of cool that they both have that the more interesting album artwork than a lot of other albums in the 70s. All right, so we come down to the final part of the episode. If you had to pick one album, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath or $1 Billion Babies, which way are you going? If you only pick one album.
Oh, I don't know. I want to cry. It hurts. It would hurt so bad to say one is lesser than the other, even though it's not. I don't know.
You got to pick one.
What's yours?
It's hard for me also.
Yeah.
I'd lean a little bit, just a slight edge towards $1 Billion Babies. Just because, I love both albums. They're both great albums. I think $1 Billion Babies is the best from Alice Cooper. And I think as much as I love Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, it's not the best from Black Sabbath.
That's fair. Because I don't necessarily agree that $1 Billion Babies is the best from Alice Cooper either. So... But I do agree that Sabbath Bloody Sabbath it's not their best either. Yeah. It's their last great, but it's not. I don't know. So it almost really boils down to mood, because they're not just thematically different albums, but there's a mood that comes with the music. And aside from a few points here and there, the Alice Cooper album's it's a slightly higher, happier mood, whereas the Sabbath one it's more of a darker mood kind of album. So it really kind of feels like apples and oranges, but I would say...
And that's why I picked these albums over, say, what we did with Metallica when we did...
Two albums from the same band.
Yeah. There are albums right after each other. There's, a lot of connections between those two. These are very different bands, very different albums.
And at the time, not really different genres, but as of right now, very different genres. If you were to categorize them now, they wouldn't necessarily be in the same category.
3, 2, 1. What's your pick, Ian? Got to do one.
I think I go Sabbath Bloody Sabbath.
Okay, all right.
But we're talking by a hair margin at best.
And that's kind of the same way I look at it. Like I said, I love both of these albums. They're both one of my some of my favorite albums from the 70s. But yeah, just a hair I give it to. Just a hair I go to $1 Billion Babies.
And you know what? The only way I can really justify that in my own mind is just because I love the album cover so much more on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. Yeah. Even though the overall packaging for $1 Billion Babies is better because it's a little bit more gimmicky and there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, I do. I agree. I love the artwork on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath.
That's as shallow of a reason as it is. That's about the best reason I can give for picking the one over the other.
Whatever works. Yeah. That's all we got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop us a comment down below. Let us know what you pick. Do you go with $1 Billion Babies, or do you go with Ian's choice of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath? Love to know what you guys think, because it really doesn't matter to me. I love both these albums equally, really. But I'd love to know what you guys think about it. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give us a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all we got. Until next time.
Talk to y'all later.
Keep on spinning. Peace.